All right, hi everyone. We'll get started. Thanks for attending the first webinar of our summer chat series, Agility During Uncertainty. We're excited to share insights with the higher ed community as we navigate the COVID-19 pandemic and the effects it's had on higher education. Everyone who's registered for today's session will receive the recording along with a link to register for the rest of the series. Next week, we'll be talking to Mike Anderson from The Ohio State University, and then the following week, we'll hear from Holly Shramsky from the University of Georgia. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen or the chat box, and we'll do a Q&A session at the end. My name is Lee Bush, Director of Business Development at Avaap, and joining me today is Barbari, Griesse, Vice President of our Organizational Change Management Practice, along with Jeff Brown, who's our Vice President of Analytics. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to talk about what to expect, today's challenges, managing through change, transforming data into insights, and then we're going to spend a minute or so telling you about Avaap, and then we're going to conclude with questions, as I mentioned before. Talk about what to expect. Most institutions are experiencing funding cutbacks from various sources: revenue losses, decreased state support, and lower funding and income from endowments, as well as coupled with increases in investment for online training. This has led to the need to be nimble to address interruptions in educational delivery and enrollment shifts. These shifts will likely lead towards increased enrollment in community colleges and high-quality online programs. There are lots of questions right now. Each decision is put in a fresh context daily, and to make informed answers, you need to monitor the right data and be able to process it quickly. In a culture that traditionally evolves slowly, the institutions that will come out ahead will be able to change quickly and to focus on the future. The huge change that occurred this past spring, mostly with a shift towards remote instruction, proved that quick changes can happen. And now, as we have the chance to improve the quality of remote instruction and become even better able to execute big changes as they come in the future. Let's talk about today's challenges. To make the right decisions, you need relevant and updated data. You need transparency on decision-making authority. You need analytics to gain insights. You need flexibility to adapt to mandates. To implement change quickly and well, you also need informed stakeholders, managed projects, and feedback to leadership. And then to monitor those results and make additional changes as you need people who know what to do. You need predictable processes. You need long-term controls. And then you need confidence and understanding of data, along with reports, dashboards, and data analytics. So now we're going to talk about managing through change. I'm going to turn it over to Barbari to talk on that.
Thank you, Lee. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. So what I really want to talk to you about today is talking about change and managing through change. And with all the forced change that's happened in the marketplace, we need to obviously be conscious of the impacts and all the people that are experiencing this change. So we're going to go to the next slide and take a look at what we call the change curve. As we go through change and we're being forced into this change, we also know that the people are going to be the most important part of the change that we experience. And we have to make sure that we have a good understanding of where they are in the curve. So when I start to look at the changes that we've been forced into, we jump from what we call a current state where everything was moving along and humming along to a future state. And we didn't have time to adjust in between. So that being the case, we need to be thoughtful as we go through the middle. And if you look at the screen here, you see there's the current state and the future state. And jumping to those is really challenging to employees. So we want to make sure we have a good understanding and not let those people go down into that dip, which is what I call that valley of disruption or the valley of despair, and be able to bring all these people along. And so when I start to think about all the change that's happening in the higher education and the higher ed area, I want to share with you some of the things, some of the perspectives on what that might look like. So let's talk about all the things that are on people's minds. So we're going to go to the next slide and take a look at it from 3 different categories. Because when we think about change management, we have to have a good understanding on what are those perspectives. Because we jump so fast, we have to look at what are the leaders' perspectives, what's our staff's perspectives, and what are our students' perspectives. And you're going to see that some of these are very similar and some of them are somewhat different, because everybody has a different role in your organization. So we have to be very mindful as we start to move through and actually understand what those perspectives are. Because if our people aren't coming along with us, we're not going to be as successful as we need. And now that we've kind of come in, settled a little bit into the new norm, we're really trying to determine, what is that new norm going to be for all of these people in higher education? And how are we going to adjust to all these new ways of working? At the same time, how are we going to be balancing all the items that are on the left-hand side that the leaders are thinking about: the quality education, the ranking of the schools, protecting that cash flow, and the instructors are trying to figure out, how do I have a safe environment if the students are coming back? How do I adjust and balance my work family if I'm going to be working more in that different world? And then taking a look at the students. They have a different type of perspective. So this is just a smattering of what some of those perspectives are that are really going to help you drive and not let that curve that I just showed you take place and get us through to the next slide. So one of the things I want to share with you is, how do we make sure we have a good understanding of what that is? So you're going to see some metrics on the right-hand side, and these are really going to help us determine, are the leaders aligned? So going back to that perspective of our leaders, are they all on the same page? Are we taking it for granted that we understand where they are, or do we really have their perspective? And then taking a look at those instructors and that staff, are they ready? Do they have everything that they're going to need? Are they able to do what we're asking them to do? What do we need to do to make sure that they are ready to go? And then at the same time, what are the students expecting? And then what are those goals? So along our journey, from a change perspective, we want to be able to measure what that's going to look like. And we want to determine where they are in that curve that I shared with you. And I think that's going to be extremely important as we start to look towards our future and starting to help higher education move in that sense, which really leads me into thinking that, we have to have all of that data. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Brown, and he's going to talk about all the data, transforming data into those insights.
Great. Thanks. Next slide, maybe. Thanks. All right. Thanks, Barbari. We'll continue to build on the story of managing change through uncertain times by turning our focus to data. So here we are, one of those times that illustrates the saying, uncertainty is the only certainty there is, right? And to build on this point, the uncertainty is going to come from uncertain areas. It won't be limited to finance or housing or instructional methods. It's going to be coming from all sides. And further, the resources will likely be tight in the near future, making it impractical to scale up capabilities across all potentially affected areas in advance. Additionally, one thing that COVID-19 has made apparent is that when there's uncertainty in 2020, people turn to data. So we would expect that to happen going forward here as well. So how do you best position your institution so the uncertain decisions that you'll undoubtedly be making now and for the foreseeable future will be informed with timely data? If we think back a few slides ago, we saw that agile leaders make decisions, implement changes, and monitor results, right? So traditionally, there was a longer period of fact-finding, sometimes informed by data, sometimes based on gut feel, that informed the initial decision. Now the focus shifts in these tight timelines to gather enough data to make a good enough decision that meets this timeline we're all up against now, and then heavily leverage data to continually adjust that decision as the situation changes, and also use data to monitor the long-term effects or outcomes as that clarity is gained. So what makes that challenging to achieve and achieve at scale across your institution? Well, one reason is that it generally requires change in people, process, and technology. So major pillars of your institution, and it affects each of these pillars in multiple ways. We know from Barbari's section, change can be difficult if not managed properly. So what does that change often look like? Next slide, please. Well, the expectations, approach, and technology that drive the way information is delivered to decision makers and the analysts upon which they rely has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. However, few of the organizations and institutions have been able to fully adopt these changes at scale. In the data industry, the former approach is referred to as traditional BI or BI, which we see on the left side here. And the more forward-looking approach is generally referred to as modern analytics, sometimes referred to as modern BI or self-service analytics. We see that on the right side here. The value within modern analytics is born out of frustration with the traditional delivery model and some of the challenges with meeting data requirements in a timely manner, right? So right now, the timely manner is of the utmost, and that's why it's important to get moving towards this modern analytics platform. So instead of people being almost exclusively focused on consistently answering the same question by sending out spreadsheets or reports, what we see here on the passive consuming information side, with modern analytics, they're presented with self-service capabilities that allow them to interact with their data and ask and answer new questions, right? Because the questions are changing all the time right now. But that requires a culture change, right? And with this shift towards self-service and speed to value, it requires the IT data architects to understand and anticipate business questions, and for business users to become data savvy to take advantage of the self-service opportunity so they can quickly answer new questions themselves. One of the frustrations with the more traditional delivery model is by the time all the requirements were gathered and the data were highly modeled to meet those requirements and answer those consistent questions, the question changed. And so no time is that more of a risk than right now when the question's changing constantly. Modern approaches focused on high-level use cases and questions. Then we move to quickly prototyping. We clarify everyone's understanding. We do more prototyping. And then we fully operationalize the solution. That's the most time-consuming part of the delivery, but we only do that after the value of the solution has been confirmed, right? So we're trying to move as quickly as possible with as few resources as possible and in as highest quality manner as possible. Then finally, at the bottom here on the technology side, the architecture and continuous and rapid innovation in the data space is challenging organizations to do more with their data. The traditional model with a more singular approach to delivering data solutions, it's not very complex, but it does so at a cost of less optimized solution, less speed to value, and not taking advantage of that innovation that's happening in the space. Creating a culture and capabilities to be flexible but governed in your data architecture and how you deliver information to people is crucial given the changing landscape. Now we'll talk about what this could look like in action. Next slide, please. So here at Avaap, we've been honored to partner with our colleagues at the state of Ohio to deliver on the state of Ohio's data response to COVID-19. So we're working on the front lines on the data side. We've gotten to take advantage of much of the modern analytics groundwork that we helped put in place with this key customer of ours. Directly working on the data portion of Ohio's COVID response has required many of the aspects that we discussed earlier. A prototype-first mentality. We do a ton of prototyping internally first, and then we release the information to the public once the data quality has been understood and validated. And internal users have found that the solution is intuitive to use, right? So similar solution, you do some prototyping internally, maybe you release it to the execs or higher level folks at that point. We've built a very flexible architecture, right? It's fully integrated architecture that can deliver data from sources ranging from real-time streaming, APIs, flat files, offline spreadsheets, forms, and analytical models. And we make that data available to data analysts to query, data scientists to hook their analytical tools, external stakeholders via integration, and the public and decision makers through intuitive dashboards. And we've created a curious culture. When information about the virus is not widely understood up front, we've presented data solutions in a way that analysts can mine data and ask more questions to gain that understanding, which is tremendously important. In summary, there are fundamental changes in organizations that are necessary across people, process, and technology to fully take advantage of data and provide the agility necessary to deal with the changing landscape, quickly answer questions that may be impossible to anticipate, and back it all with data to continuously understand and adjust your decisions to keep up with that changing landscape. At this point, I'll hand it back to Lee to help finish up.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So it's going to take a minute just to inform you a little bit about Avaap. give you some background on who we are for those that don't know us. So Avaap, we've got over 600 consultants. Higher ed is at our core. We've supported higher ed institutions since day one. If you look at sort of our capabilities in different areas that we focus, it's just outlined here: IT strategy, vendor selection, project program management, organizational change management, business intelligence and analytics, as you heard from two of our leaders there today, as well as business process, business analysis, and then solution architecture. And many times when we engage with a higher ed client, these capabilities are brought together in a solution. So it could be a complete cloud strategy, or move to the cloud, or it could be a specific area where we're helping deliver on a short-term project or engagement. So this just gives you a high-level overview of who we are. And then the next slide here gives you some idea of our clients. As you can see, a lot of higher ed clients, as well as Fortune 500s and some well-known brands out there. So, all right. So before we go to the Q&A session, and the intent of this event was to make it short, I just wanted to remind everybody that next week we're going to be hearing from Mike Anderson at The Ohio State University. You can go online and register at avaap.com/events. And then we're also going to be sending a link with today's recording as well, too. You can sign up there as well. And then following that, on the 18th of June, we've got Holly Shramsky from the University of Georgia to talk about analytics. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa to go through a Q&A session and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Lee, and thanks, Barbari and Jeff. So we had a few questions come in throughout the presentation, but as we go through the ones that already came in, please feel free to use either the chat box or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. So the first question is, how can I introduce OCM to my university's leadership if they've never utilized it before?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Vanessa, whoever put that in the chat. That is something that we hear quite a bit. So understanding OCM, which is really organizational change management, and looking at it from a university standpoint, is understanding how we can, when we looked at those three areas, going back and looking at those leaders and helping them understand that we have to bring that entire staff along with us. And I think you're going to have some good insight when you hear from Mike and Holly in the next two sessions, because we've done a lot of change management at The Ohio State University and the University of Georgia. So they're going to be able to give you some real insight into how change management's been introduced. Some of those have been introduced through a technology upgrade, and some of them have been introduced whether they were just doing an organizational redesign. But we're happy to get with you and share with you the best way to introduce that. So thank you. That's a good question. Are there any other questions that you have?
Yeah, thanks, Barbari. Let's see. In what areas of a university do you think an analytics presence would be most helpful?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. I mean, I think it's anything that's interfacing with the students directly, right? That's where the changes are going to happen rapidly, and the deployment of the decisions is going to affect, obviously, just so many more people. So to me, that's where you've got to have your data house in order, because you're going to be shifting a large, stakeholder group in the students. And if, so you obviously want to be data informed through that process, but also give you that agility to make the right decisions and adjust those, as quickly and nimbly as possible, since you're trying to communicate and coordinate with such a large group. If it's internal things, obviously you just have a little bit more leeway. If there's an outbreak in a building of administrative type employees, it's a little easier to handle that than trying to get a decision out to, 10,000 students or something like that. So I think really any of those areas that are going to directly affect students and how the students interact with the university are really going to have that data backing up front.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Looks like we just have a few more questions. This person asks, what is the number one thing a leader can do when leading their team during this time?
Yeah, so I'll take that one, Jeff. During this time, the leader has to make sure that they're active. They have to make sure that they're out in front of the organization and they're out in front of their leaders and making sure that what I call they're building that coalition of other leaders that are underneath them as they're going through these, jumping from this current state to the future state. And communication is probably key, but communication just not in the email format is going to be the best. There's quite a few leaders that we've seen, and we can give you more examples of how they've been really successful as they've transitioned from where we are now.
Thanks, Barbari. All right, looks like this is our last question. We have a tight budget, but want to increase the skills we have in-house. What is one way to do that?
I think that one would be for you, Jeff. If you're looking, does it say whether they're looking at it from an analytical standpoint?
I think it's from a change management standpoint.
Okay, then I'll take that one. Great, so that would be one that we can help you. We are the only authorized training provider for ProSci in the United States. So if you're looking at making sure that you can improve the skills and the change management skills for your folks that are on the ground, we have that opportunity to come to you and give you that certification, whether we do it through virtual learning or we do it in person with a group of individuals from your university. So we are more than happy to sit with you and give you some options and opportunity, whether it's going to be something that's in that 3-day certification or something where they just need to understand change management and understand what their employees are going through. So we look forward to helping you with that one.
Thanks, Barbari, and thanks, Jeff. It looks like that's all of the questions that came in, but of course, if you have any more questions, feel free to email any of our presenters. Lee's email is up on the screen, and he can always get the question to the right person.
Great. All right, well, it sounds like that's it, unless anybody else has any last minute questions. We'll go ahead and end things for today and see you next week. All right. Thanks, everyone.